Good afternoon. Welcome to our monthly policy update. I see people entering the virtual conference hall now. We'll just give people a moment for their technology to connect. Apologies that we were running a minute or two late. I was hanging some last minute holiday lights in my background. So just trying to make sure that this November-December joint edition, double edition of the monthly policy update is as festive as you all deserve. So again, I'm looking at a couple minutes past the hour, so why don't we dive right in? And again, I want to welcome you to a special double edition of Independent Sector's monthly policy update. I'm Ben Kershaw. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Government Relations here at IS. If you're joining us for the first time on an Independent Sector webinar, I want to welcome you. Independent Sector is a national membership organization made up of nonprofits, foundations, and corporate giving programs working to ensure all people living in the United States thrive. This is a webinar, so your lines are muted. We'll pause periodically to ask for questions. Please feel free to submit them in the Q&A function at any time. We welcome chat and general banter in the chat function. This is a monthly benefit, this webinar, for IS members. If you're not an IS member and you're with us today and you want to find out more, we'll hope you'll contact membership@independentsector.org. Our team would be happy to help. Before we start, a lot of things we got to talk about today. I want to respectfully acknowledge that I'm joining you for today from Washington, D.C. It is the ancestral home of the Piscataway people. They're still in the area working to reclaim their land and their traditional practices. Also, a lot of the buildings that we inhabit in Washington were built by enslaved people. Wherever you are joining us from today, welcome. I'm joined today by Wes Coulomb, the managing director at Washington Council Ernst & Young. And Wes gets extra kudos for being with us today. I don't think anyone has ever doubted Wes and the Washington Council team's reliability and commitment to the charitable sector. We have pulled Wes out of a holiday party for this. And if you know Washington, you know that a lot of business also gets done in holiday parties. So we're really glad to have you with us today, Wes. There's a lot, sort of going on the Hill, but the rhythm of early December in Washington, D.C. is a little bit different this year than it has been in years past. So can you set the stage for us a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Good to be with you this afternoon, everyone. This year it seems a little bit different. Obviously, we've had a little bit of turmoil in the House, particular with the change in speaker. New speaker coming in, inheriting lots of unfinished business. The biggest one of which is the unfinished appropriations process with the CR expiring in November. Speaker Johnson was able to work out a extension of that CR into the 2024, and it did kind of a two-tiered approach, which is unusual, and I've never seen that happen before. They usually do a CR for the entire appropriations process to one date and move forward towards that. What he was trying to accomplish is, I think, two things. One is trying to avoid the usual year-end omnibus appropriations packaging is done right before they break for the holidays, end of December, keeping Congress in, usually up until about close to Christmas, really to break. He wanted to avoid that situation and wanted to push everything into 2024. We also wanted to kind of segregate out the appropriations bills into two parts. So 4 of them would be coming on, expiring on January 19th, and the rest of them would expire on February 2nd, kind of give it 2 bites at the apple, if you will, to finish up the appropriations bills. When they passed the CR, we thought they would actually maybe move towards passing some individual appropriations bills. They've only passed a handful through the House and more in the House, I think 7 or so in the House and 3 or 4 in the Senate. Not very much progress. But they did not advance any more appropriations bills, or have not yet advanced any more appropriations bills. I think they're kind of looking towards that January 19th deadline to kind of figure out what they can do next. And really, in order to actually finalize an appropriations bill, they need to have an agreement on overall top line number. Where are they going to what number are they going to kind of spend overall, and then you kind of then break it down amongst the 12 appropriations bills, what they can divvy up in each bucket. They have not reached that agreement. If you recall, in the summer, they had a debt limit deal to extend the debt limit until after the election next year. And part of that, they did set the top line numbers for the appropriations process for 2024 and 2025. The House did not want to agree to that. They wanted to go deeper in their cuts. The Senate, for the most part, have kind of adhered to those numbers in the debt limit deal passed in the summertime. That's kind of where they've been writing their appropriations bills together to that. We did have a little bit of breakthrough this week in the sense that some of the House Republicans said they would agree to going back to that number from the debt limit deal earlier this summer for 2024, but would not include some of the side deals that were discussed and negotiated and agreed to as part of that deal, because the numbers for particularly non-defense spending were dramatically reduced as part of that agreement. So their position is they would be willing to go back to the numbers, but not to plus up those numbers with some of the side deals agreements that they agreed to in June. So we'll see how that plays out. Obviously, they're not going to reach an agreement on appropriations. They're doing much more doing now when they break for the holidays. They do return the first week of January for the new session of Congress. That's where we have to deal with this. And we'll see how it plays out. I don't see any movement other than what the House Republicans have agreed to on this. I don't think it solves the problem as far as getting a top line agreement quite yet, but they're working towards that. That's really what they need to have done before they can figure out the details of each appropriations bill. Maybe they will by the end of next week. Both House and Senate are scheduled to be in session through next Thursday and Friday. So maybe there'll be some discussions and some agreements before they leave town and give the appropriators some time over the break to work on those bills individually when they come back in January. We also, so what does that mean? Well, that means basically we don't have a big honest appropriations bill in December. So as far as doing other miscellaneous items, expired provisions, mainly in the tax code, tax extenders, the view there is they're not likely to get done. There's no vehicle to push them through. And for those tax provisions to move on their own, it seems like a tall order at this stage of the game. And so I think people are looking towards the January, February timeframe for revisiting the tax provisions as part of some year-end negotiated deal on the spending side. Obviously, they do have to do a couple of items before they leave town. One is the National Defense Authorization Act, which they just agreed to last night to a Congress agreement that will be, I think, passed the House and Senate fairly short order before they leave town, possibly even this week. Possible vote, maybe in the Senate, and then possibly a vote in the House next week on the NDAA. They also have to are working on a supplemental appropriations bill to provide additional funds for Ukraine defense as well as for Israel. And that's been kind of tied up in a negotiation around demands by the Republicans in the House to have some border security provisions and funding attached to that overall larger package. That's about $100+ billion in additional spending as part of that package. So we'll see if that moves forward. Real sticking point, as I mentioned, is not necessarily the funding for Ukraine and Israel, but really what can they do and what can they agree to pacify and get the votes in the House for Speaker Johnson and his members on border security at the U.S. southern border. And those negotiations, I think, are ongoing, but the intent is try to get that done and finalized by the end of next week before they leave town. Well, a lot of activity going on in the committee process. You have mostly in the House. The House Ways and Means Committee had a markup this last week on a couple of different bills, U.S.-Taiwan tax agreement. It also had in that markup two provisions that dealt with nonprofit issues. One, to kind of clarify veteran service organizations' ability to receive tax-deductible contributions, and also a separate bill that would deny tax status to nonprofit organizations that support Hamas or other terrorist organizations. Separate process there as part of that markup this week. We also have on the agenda for next week, just recently announced a tax oversight subcommittee hearing in the Ways and Means Committee for next Wednesday, 13th, as a follow-up to the RFI, if you recall, the Oversight Committee put out asking for comments and submissions from folks regarding nonprofit activities in nonprofit organizations and political activities. Focused on that was a little bit regarding international and foreign funding of those activities. They're going to be hearing on that, kind of the title of the hearing is the growth of the tech sector in the impact on American political landscape. So I think kind of the nonprofit sector and politics is really the theme there. We haven't seen the witness list for that hearing. We'll see that early next week in a little more details. We talked to the staff about how that is going to be set up. That's kind of on the agenda for next week in the Ways and Means Committee hearings. We'll have to watch that very closely as that plays out. I mean, that's all we have, I think, on the agenda. I think we're looking forward to see what they can finish by the end of next week. And then obviously the big issues, I think, are going to mostly be punted into next year. The FAA with authorization is not going to get done. The farm bill is still out there. So I think there's a lot of unfinished business kind of piling up into the first part of 2024 that need to address. Obviously, 2024 is a election year. So campaign season is already underway. From a political standpoint, we've already seen a lot of retirements taking place in the House and the Senate, members running for different offices. So we expect to see a lot of turnover, a lot of change in Congress after the 2024 election. Obviously, with the presidential election as well, it'll be a very different landscape in the following session of Congress after the election next year. Happy to stop there and answer any questions, Ben.
Thank you, Wes. We really appreciate it. And then again, there's a lot we could dig in on here, sort of on the overall landscape and on the dynamics, you identified in the Ways and Means Committee in particular. So we will invite questions. Q&A box is the best place to drop those. So Wes, we've got this situation where it's over a month until the next appropriations deadline, but there aren't a whole lot of legislative working days in there. We've seen encouraging signs of, sort of the willingness to agree to past deals, but, getting agreement on 4 appropriations bills is no small feat. Do you think, should we be expecting that that's definitely going to happen, and that, there are other holiday parties happening around town where people are cutting those deals right now? Or is this all going to get kicked to February? How should we be expecting that to play out?
That's a good question, Ben. The crystal ball on this is very murky. Obviously, they have to pass appropriations bills to fund this federal government every fiscal year. And this year, under the debt limit deal, there was a sequester penalty, if you will. If you don't get a CR or get a full appropriations bill passed by January 1st, then the 1% across the board cut kicks in based on 2023 spending levels. That actually will not really bite until April 30th of next year. And so while it kicks in on January 1st, it becomes effective, wasn't actually claw back the money until April 30th next year. So they have a little bit of time to figure this out, and they could see they can't agree to the numbers by January. You could see this pushed out into February. I would not think they want to push it beyond that, because the dynamics really don't change a whole lot. You do have a couple of factors that come into play with a couple of members in the House retiring and leaving by the end of the calendar year. So in January, the Republicans will be down another seat, given Speaker McCarthy's announcement, former Speaker McCarthy's announcement yesterday. So I think they want to get this done as soon as possible before the tides even change further as we get farther into the year next year. But it really comes down to agreeing to a top line number. I think the movement is towards the agreement that they had in June, and kind of find a way to build appropriations package based on those numbers, and write the details from there. That's really be a leadership call on where they want to go on that. So I think they can figure that out. I don't think they will get much movement between now and then they leave for the break, but I think in early January they'll come to a better agreement on that, and that's kind of where they need to start.
Thanks, Wes. Yeah, it's easy for members to say now, but we've heard, particularly some of the House Republicans who voted for this current continuing resolution say that they're done voting for continuing resolutions and that it's a real bill or it's a shutdown. We'll see. Hopefully that people take that threat seriously and get something done.
Right.
So I also want to ask you, Wes, about the tax deal landscape. It is our sense that, the disagreements on Capitol Hill are not about whether to restore the $300 charitable deduction for every American. We certainly think it ought to get restored. We're thrilled with the bipartisan support that's been built for restoring and significantly expanding it. We've seen some encouraging signs in the press about potential progress towards a deal, and this balance of business tax provisions and the child tax credit that seems to need to be struck. So, are there any updates on those big picture negotiations? And when are we looking at that timeline?
Yeah, good question, Ben. So the parameters of this are kind of three business provisions that expired. They were set to sunset as part of the 2017 tax bill. They expired in 2022, and they're hitting corporate tax and financial statements as we speak this year. They're about $50 billion to extend those for another year or two. The view would be from Democrats, they want to have some comparable individual, moderate income tax relief, and they've targeted the child tax credit expansions that were part of the American Rescue Plan 2021 that expired as a way to balance that tax package out. And so another $50 billion they'd be allocated to those fixes. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of urgency to get a deal on that, notwithstanding the push from both sides to do something that obviously extenders in the past have not been paid for, and so $100 billion unpaid for tax relief, even if it's balanced between business and individuals in this environment, as they're negotiating a spending plan that's looking to probably freeze or maybe cut spending potentially from the House Republicans' perspective, is a difficult lift in this environment. And you have 2025, where you have all of the individual tax cuts expire from 2017, and there will be a big tax package then. So there's interest in doing it. Talking to staff and the meetings they had this week, doesn't seem that they're moving towards getting something done before they break for the holidays. I think the sense is they're trying to get something attached to a bigger bill in January or February. If they can accomplish that. I think there's willingness on both sides. Both Chairman Smith in the House and Chairman Wyden in the Senate have been talking, trying to work out the parameters of a package. But I think the politics and the vehicle are really the holdup here in getting that done. So we'll have to watch that and see how that progresses out. But I don't see much movement until they come back in the new year on that. And we'll see what they can come up with as far as the package is concerned. And then if those big items get addressed, then hopefully they'll be able to add the other provisions that are less expensive and attached to that package as well, and get it all done at one time. But there's certainly a risk this could not get done and kind of push into further into next year.
Thank you. If they're smart, they'll reach a deal, but not tell any of us until a vehicle comes around, right? They don't need that hanging out there, getting holes poked in it for weeks.
Exactly.
So on the topic of charitable giving, I want to move us on. We will pause one more time for questions. I mentioned the Charitable Act and our sector's continued advocacy for that in Congress. I should also note that since this group last convened, specifically on November 7th, independent sector, along with the Charitable Giving Coalition, had the chance to convene a roundtable at the White House for key officials from around various White House offices. There's some fun pictures from that meeting, making the rounds on social media. It was, just a chance for our sector to share an update around some of the concerning trends we've seen, both from last year and from the early parts of this year about what's happening to giving, and a chance for us all collectively to highlight what we think is the solution. And then, again, since we last spoke, we've celebrated Giving Tuesday as a sector and as a nation. And the Charitable Giving Coalition sent a letter to Capitol Hill with over 1,000 signatures from organizations in support of that legislation, spanning all 50 states. So we're gratified by the support that this bill has built. It's got more co-sponsors now than it has, ever in the past. But that's only half the battle. Always critical to understand the landscape too. Similarly, in terms of coalition advocacy, I should note that support is building for legislation we discussed in depth on our last monthly policy update, the Streamlining Federal Grants Act. Recently, more than 800 nonprofits wrote to congressional leaders in support of that legislation, which, again, we will remind takes important steps towards standardizing federal grant funding opportunities, providing more transparency around them, and trying to incorporate workforce development and equitable access into many federal grant policies. That letter's still open for signatures, and we'll certainly be sure to share that. We encourage folks to add their support. Two other updates. One more sort of coalition action to flag for people is that earlier this year, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act was once again introduced. And last week, 29 member organizations of the Nonprofit Infrastructure Coalition wrote in support of that. Whether your mission is arts or education or housing or disaster relief or anything else in our diverse sector, we believe that a healthy civil society requires a healthy democracy in which people can exercise their most basic democratic right to vote. Last, I should flag that the Internal Revenue Service and the Treasury Department have released long-awaited regulations and guidelines on donor-advised funds. This is part of regulation that was directed by the Pension Protection Act of 2006. And these are, some core definitions about what constitutes a donor-advised fund, and taxes and excise taxes on funds and on fund managers who violate certain rules. So we'll include a summary on this, but the notice of proposed rulemaking is open for comment until January 16th. And I'll say independent sector remains eager to hear from people as we unpack these dense regulations. So with those updates, I want to pause one more time to see if people have questions about the donor advised fund rules, about the Streamlining Federal Grants Act, about the Charitable Act, about the tax or the appropriations landscape on Capitol Hill. If your questions are, hey, what's going to happen at this hearing next week, we will tell you as soon as we know. We have reached out to staff on the committee, as Wes noted, and we believe it's a follow-on from the request for information. We're eager might not be the word. We're very interested to see how this goes and eager to shape it with you all. Just making sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. Thank you, as ever, Manuel, for sharing those links. So again, I want to thank Wes Coulomb. I want to thank Manuel Gomez on our team. I would be remiss if I didn't note an absence from this month's call. Our dear colleague, Ana Montañez, has gone on to an exciting new opportunity. We're thrilled for her. It is our loss, but she contributed in such extraordinary ways to this community and to this monthly update too. So again, we hope you have a wonderful holiday season. We hope that there are not major breaking legislative developments that require us to convene again this year. And thanks for the work you do day in and day out. We will look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks again, Wes.
Take care.